Thanking the organizers, Arindam and Krishnendu, for inviting me to give this talk. So here I'm going to give you a quick look at the work that I've been doing with a number of collaborators on various transport phenomena on the surfaces of topological insulators, and this has appeared in 5 papers over the last 2 years or so. So let me see how much of this I can get through. So the outline of the talk is as follows. First, there will be a very quick introduction to topological insulators. So this has been covered by many other people, including Zahid Hasan, so I won't say much. And then I'll actually tell you about the different things that we have done in this transport problem. Okay, so I'll tell you about transport that happens on the surface if you have magnetic and potential barriers. What happens if you have junctions of 2 topological insulators with a barrier. Also, if there are 2 topological insulators whose surfaces are at an angle with respect to each other. What happens if you have a junction of 2 surfaces of a topological insulator and a metal. And finally, what information you can get if you tunnel from a spin polarized STM onto the surface of a topological insulator. Okay. So this is a very quick view of 3-dimensional topological insulators. You have heard a lot about this already. So all I'll say here is that these are, for my purpose, these are materials which have strong spin orbit coupling and are gapped in the bulk ideally, so that they are insulating in the bulk, but they have gapless electrons on the surface which are described by the 2-dimensional Dirac equation, and these remain gapless for topological reasons if their only perturbations are time reversal invariant, so non-magnetic impurities and so on, then they remain gapless. And there are many examples known now, bismuth selenide, bismuth telluride, and this picture you saw earlier this morning. So this material has a single Dirac cone on each surface, not each surface but at least some surfaces, and these states show spin momentum locking. So if you go around in momentum, so this is kx and ky, if you go around momentum, the red arrows show the direction of the spin. So you see that the spin is always at 90 degrees to the momentum. They both lie in the plane of the surface, but they are 90 degrees to each other, and they are at 90 degrees in a particular way, right-handed or left-handed. It's right-handed here. Also, here's a picture which also you have seen of the Dirac point. So the positive and negative energy states touch each other at one point. So you have a cone, coming up and coming down from that point. Okay, so this is from this. These pictures are from this paper from Zahid Hasan's group. Okay, so the equation that the surface electrons satisfy is the Dirac equation. So it has this form which is a little bit peculiar because you have sigma x delta, derivative in y direction minus sigma y delta x. So as I said, the spin and linear momentum are at right angles to each other, so that's why you have that form. The velocity typically is of this order. In bismuth selenide it's 6 × 10⁵ meters per second, so it's about half the velocity compared to graphene. So here the form of the solutions, let's say positive energy, and these are the wave functions. And so if you take this wave function and calculate the expectation value of the spin, you discover that it's in a direction which is perpendicular to both the outward normal to the surface and the linear momentum. So that's what I meant by spin momentum locking. Okay, so the rest of the talk are these different papers that I'll talk about. We basically propose many different methods for probing the Dirac nature of the electrons and also this phenomenon of spin momentum locking. Okay, so the first work that I'll talk about is what happens if you put down barriers on the surface of a topological insulator. So these could be magnetic barriers or they could be potential barriers. So you can put down a magnetic barrier by just bringing just theoretical point of view by bringing a ferromagnetic film close to this surface, and then that induces that couples to the electrons by a Zeeman coupling. You can put down potential barriers by attaching a gate there and applying a potential to it. We also studied what happens if you have superconducting barriers, where you put a superconducting film next to this topological insulator surface and then by proximity effect induce superconductivity. But I'll not talk about the superconducting barrier part in this talk. Okay, so this is from this paper. So first of all, we are assuming that this ferromagnetic film has only a spin exchange coupling to the electrons on the surface. In other words, a Zeeman coupling, and there is no coupling to the orbital motion. Okay. So the coupling to the magnetic field, so if the magnetic field is pointing in the xy direction, so in the plane, then coupling to that just looks like a vector potential, because it's a coupling to just sigma x and sigma y, and the Dirac equation that I wrote earlier just had sigma x delta y minus sigma y delta x. So now you have an extra term coupling to sigma x if the magnetic field is in the x direction, and you can see that it's just shifting the potential, the momentum in the y direction. So it's like a vector potential for these electrons. This m here is some complicated combination of the magnetic field produced by this ferromagnetic film and the strength of its coupling to the interact electrons, the G factor and everything. So I'm just putting them all together and calling this m. So if you solve this equation, you find this is the dispersion. So the E is square root of kx squared plus, as you can see from here, ky plus m squared. So the point about this is that if m is very large, then if you want the electrons to have a definite energy, they are coming from a region where there is no m. Okay, so free electrons, and then they enter a region where there is an m. So if this is very large, then to keep the energy the same, kx may have to become imaginary. Okay, and when that happens, it means that the electrons, the wave functions decays exponentially in that region. Okay, so normally we know that Dirac electrons, it's very hard to confine Dirac electrons using potential barriers. In fact, it cannot, because it just goes through potential barriers because of Klein tunneling. But you can certainly confine it using magnetic fields, and this is the reason why it can happen. Okay, so in other words, by turning on a magnetic barrier of sufficient strength, this can act as a switch on the current. Okay, so you can cut off the current from one side of the barrier to the other side if you have a strong enough magnetic field. Okay, so this is just some technical stuff. So what we did is we computed the transmission probability across the barrier, imposing continuity of the wave function, and this is not completely trivial. So I'll tell you later what continuity of the wave function really means across a barrier. So we calculate the transmission probability across the barrier. This is going to be a function of the energy of the incident electron, the angle of incidence, and this m. And then the differential conductance has an expression like this. So this is the conductance in the direction perpendicular to the barrier. So that's why you get this factor of cosine theta, where theta is the angle of incidence. Okay, so here are some plots. So this is the conductance in units of G0, which is some simple normalization, as a function of this parameter z. Now z is a product of the width of the barrier, the chemical potential. Okay, and the different plots here are for different values of this magnetic field, the magnetic barrier strength. Okay, so as I said, if the magnetic barrier is very weak, this green curve which you can barely see, the conductance doesn't change very much with the width of the barrier. But as you make the magnetic barrier stronger, the conductance becomes less till you get to a point where if the barrier is very large in some units, m over the chemical potential being 2.1, the conductance drops very quickly. So this is the point where it's acting like a switch. So you have such a strong magnetic barrier that the electron wave function becomes imaginary inside the barrier, and then the wave function decays. So the conductance vanishes beyond a certain point. The other thing to observe here is that you have oscillations as d increases. So this is actually characteristic of Dirac electrons as opposed to electrons satisfying the Schrodinger equation. In the Schrodinger equation, when you have a barrier, the wave function in the barrier just decays exponentially. But in the for a Dirac equation, you can show that it actually oscillates with the barrier, and it's just a simple property of solutions of the Dirac equation. It has to do with this Klein tunneling, that electrons can go through barriers. Dirac electrons can go through barriers. Okay, so this is the same kind of plot that's plotted with different variables. So now we have a fixed m in each curve, and we are plotting the conductance as a function of the bias across the barrier. So once again, you see that for every magnetic field, you need a minimum bias before the electrons start conducting across the barrier, and that's again because if the bias is too low, then the wave functions decay exponentially through the barrier, and the electrons don't get through. And the minimum bias that you need for the electrons to get through as a function of the magnetic field. It's a straight line that's shown here. So that's the bias versus the magnetic field. So this is a similar plot, but this time we have both a potential barrier and a magnetic barrier next to each other. And once again you see that so for a fixed applied voltage and chemical potential, so this is a surface plot versus the width d of the barrier, the magnetic barrier, and the magnetization. You see these oscillations in the conductance. So these are they're actually resonances. They get to 1 at certain values of the width. So these are again because of the Dirac nature of the electrons. Okay. We also looked at, in a longer paper, we looked at the effect of crossed electric and magnetic fields. Now this is a very interesting problem. So you have this surface, the XY surface of the topological insulator, and you have, let's say you apply an electric field in the x direction, and there's a magnetic field which has some component in the normal direction z, and some component in a direction y, which is perpendicular to the electric field. Okay. So it turns out that you can actually solve this problem. So this was actually done in this very nice piece of work by 3 people. Bhaskaran is here. So who showed that this problem can, well, this actually looked at the problem where you just have B in the Z direction and E in the X direction, but you can easily put in this extra thing with a B in the Y direction as well. So you can do a Lorentz transformation. So remember, you have a Dirac equation with a certain velocity appearing in it. So mathematically this is really the same as relativistic system, except that the speed is v and not the speed of light, but exactly the same mathematical transformations will go through. You can do Lorentz transformations, and you can show that if the electric field is less than the component of the magnetic field perpendicular to the plane, so if the electric field is less, you can do a Lorentz transformation and go to a frame where the electric field is 0. Okay. And then you get a pure magnetic field problem which has Landau levels and so on, and there is no transport in that set, in that case, because the electric field has gone to 0. So there is nothing to drive the electrons. On the other hand, if the electric field is more than Vb sin theta, the component of B perpendicular to the plane, then you can go to a frame where B is 0. So you have a problem with only an electric field and no magnetic field. So you have no Landau levels, and you just have transport because of the electric field.
What about when they're exactly equal?
Yes, so that's kind of a singular point. So it's sort of on the verge. All the Landau levels that you get, if B was slightly more, they all collapse to the same energy. Okay, so that's kind of a singular point. So very hard to look at exactly that point. Okay. So as you increase so let's say you have a magnetic field and you increase the electric field from zeros, the first Landau level collapses to 0 energy, as I said, when E crosses the magnetic field. Okay, so that's the mathematics. So here is what we found looking at the conductance. So okay, so what this is that we have taken different ratios of E by V times B. So this is dimensionless in the units we are working in. So if the let's see, if the electric field is very large, so the blue curve, then so what we are plotting here is the conductance versus the tilt angle. So theta is the angle made by the magnetic field with respect to the xy plane. So remember, as you increase the tilt angle, so the magnetic field is more and more of it is pointing out of the plane. If the electric field is not large enough, you will get to a point where E will become less than Vb. Okay, so at that point, as I said, you will just get Landau levels and there will be no conductance across the system. So that happens for the weakest electric field plot. So when E by Vb is 1, that's black curve. So beyond a certain angle, which is pi by 2 actually, beyond some angle you don't get any conductance. On the other hand, if E is very large compared to B, like when it's 3, then even if you tilt the magnetic field, you are always in the regime where the magnetic field essentially is 0 after the Lorentz transformation, and you always get transport. Okay, so this shape of this curve very nicely illustrates this effect of crossed electric and magnetic field, and how the character of the system changes depending on which one is larger, the electric or magnetic field. Okay, so then let me get on to the next thing that we worked on. So here we have two topologically insulated surfaces which are separated by a junction which is basically a line. Okay, so these are two surfaces and there's a line joining them, Now these actually may be the same topological insulator material, but you might put down a barrier here. So similar to what I discussed in the beginning, but now I'm just considering the thin barrier limit. So it could be like that, two identical topological insulators separated by barrier, or it could be two different topological insulators, maybe with different velocities V1 and V2. So this is a general analysis. So first of all, you have to look at what the boundary condition is that you have to impose on this system, and it turns out that so you have to satisfy current conservation in the y direction. So y is the direction perpendicular to this line junction, and you find that the general linear relation satisfying this boundary condition is given here. So psi 2, the wave function on this side, just on right side of the barrier, must be equal to psi 1 times multiplied by e to the minus I alpha sigma x from the left. Okay. Now this alpha has the interpretation of the barrier strength. So this you can show by taking a barrier and then taking the limit of this barrier going to 0, but delta function barrier, so that the integrated strength is alpha. And so here you see that the boundary condition that you have to impose at a barrier is not really trivial. It actually corresponds to a rotation of the wave function around the x-axis, which is the axis along which the barrier runs. Okay. The other interesting thing to notice is that this boundary condition is periodic in alpha. Okay, so every time as you keep increasing the barrier, when alpha goes from 0, which is no barrier, to 2 pi, that's equivalent to having no barrier. So again, you get this periodicity, which is characteristic of Dirac electrons. Okay, so so the conductance and everything is going to be periodic function of alpha. Okay.
So because of the spin momentum locking, if the incidence is 90, it will be like a spin flips kind.
That's right. Yeah. So alpha equals that's right. Alpha equals pi. Pi by 2 is the maximum barrier strength that you can have, and beyond that it again starts looking like a weaker and weaker barrier, and alpha equals pi actually doesn't look like a barrier at all.
So the reflected electron will have opposite spin.
Yes, but that's right. But that has to be because it's a topological insulator surface. Yeah.
Just a standard barrier gives.
Yeah. Okay, so we looked at two things. One is the scattering problem, where you have an incident electron and there's some reflection and there's some transmission. Conservation of energy and momentum gives you some relation like this, and then you can use those boundary conditions that I mentioned to find the reflection transmission probabilities. And so I'm not going to show you these expressions; these are pretty lengthy, but I'll show you a plot. So there's one kind of problem that you can study. This is a scattering problem. You also can, before I go on to discuss the conductance, I also want to mention that in this system you can get edge states. So what can happen is that there are states which live along this line, and so they're plane waves along the line and then decay exponentially away from the line. So these are kind of states which are bound to the line junction, and they have some interesting features. One is that this is the expression for the velocity, and you find that this velocity is less than both v1 and v2. So these edge states have a velocity in the line which is less than the velocities in the two bulk, on the two surfaces of the topological insulators. So they have a different dispersion. They also have a spin which points in the yz plane, not in the xy plane. So their spin is not locked to their momentum in the same direction as these electrons in the rest of the topological insulator surface. So by looking at their energy momentum dispersion and their spin, in principle they can be distinguished from the states elsewhere in the surface. And so here's a plot of the velocity as a function of this barrier alpha.
The velocity vanishes when alpha is pi.
That we did. So this was a lot of this work is with Krishnendu Sengupta, by the way, who is here. So this is when what happens now. You have again the same two surfaces of topological insulators, but now you attach a metal. Okay, and so what happens in that case? So 1 and 2 are topological insulators. So this is the problem that we have solved earlier, and now we are testing a third surface which is metal. So these are the Hamiltonians in the three regions. So it's a Dirac Hamiltonian surfaces 1 and 2 and a Schrodinger Hamiltonian surface 3. Okay, so it immediately raises an interesting mathematical question, which is what is the boundary condition that the electrons have to satisfy on this line, because you have Dirac Hamiltonians on 2 of them and Schrodinger Hamiltonian third, and they look completely different. It's first order derivative, space derivative on 2 surfaces, and second order in the third surface.
So metal is a 2D metal.
Yeah, you can think of it as a surface of a metal. So imagine that there is something underneath which is insulating. So nothing goes into the bulk, it has to go into the surface, and it's a metal.
So interface 2 is not seeing any metal.
Interface 2 is not seeing a metal. Interface 1 is all, I mean both 1 and 2 only see the metal along the junction, elsewhere they don't see any metal. Okay.
Because of spin you need twice as many boundary conditions.
Okay, so you'll see what the boundary condition is, that's there in the next slide. So this is the current conservation. So this is the familiar current, form of the current for Schrodinger electrons. It's got this psi dagger grad psi imaginary part, and then these are the currents on the topological insulator side. So this is what you have to match, and as you can see, it's a peculiar problem because the current on the metal side has both a wave function and its derivative. The current on the topological side only has the wave functions, there are no derivatives. So this is the most general boundary condition it turns out. So it has 4 parameters, C alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3. So let me explain where these 4 parameters come from. So imagine that you have a barrier along this. So a barrier along this line junction is a barrier for all the 3. It's barrier for 1, 2 and 3. The barriers on 1 and 2, they give you this factor of e to the I alpha sigma x that we have already seen before. So that's where you get these exponential factors, except that the barrier strength need not be equal exactly on the 3 sides. So you have an alpha 1 for side 1 and alpha 2 on side 2. So that's those 2 parameters, alpha 1 and alpha 2. And alpha 3 is a barrier which you are familiar from Schrodinger equation. So if you have a delta function interaction, then it causes a discontinuity in the first derivative of the wave function, and that's where that barrier strength alpha 3 shows up. So we understand these 3 parameters. It turns out there's another parameter which shows up, which is C, and we don't quite understand this very well. I mean, of course, if you started with a kind of microscopic model, like lattice model for this system, then depending on various microscopic details of the system, I'm sure this parameter C will show up, but we have not actually done that. One thing you can do with this parameter is that you can look at different limits of it, and it turns out that if it either becomes very large or very small, the metal disconnects from the topological insulators. So you know that limit has to be there in some way. But in our numerical calculations, we have just set C equal to 1. Okay, so that's an arbitrary choice we have made. We don't really know where this parameter comes from. So this will need a detailed microscopic analysis of a barrier to understand this parameter. Okay, so let me just show few things here. So this is what happens when you have an electron incident from, let's say, the first topological insulator. How much of it goes into the metal? So this is a current in units of some I0 defined here, and x is the angle of incidence. So x equals 0 is normal incidence. So you find that there is some behavior. So you have more current coming in if the electron comes in normally. So that just, normal incidence always gives you the maximum transmission for Dirac electrons, and what is plotted on this side is the barrier strength. So it decreases with the barrier strength. So what you can see is you can see some faint oscillations. So it is decreasing as well as oscillating. So this is not very clear from this picture, but so here's another picture. So here we have looked at the spin current. So the previous one was the charge current, which is how much of the electron went through regardless of its spin. So the sum of the spin up and spin down parts. Here's the difference of spin up and spin down parts. So there's the spin current going to the metal, and now you see these oscillations very clearly. So so again, it's a function of this is the current going through, transmitted to the metal as a function of angle of incidence and the barrier width, and you can see that as you increase the barrier width, it's decaying, but it's also oscillating. Okay, so this is where you are really seeing this effect of having topological insulators in contact with metals, because on the topological insulator side, the electrons are described by the Dirac equation. So there you know that they oscillate in the presence of a barrier. Whereas on the metal side, if you have a barrier, then the electron wave function just decays exponentially. Okay, so here you see a sort of combination of the two. Okay, so you see both oscillations and decay. Okay, so this is kind of nice that this particular setup shows you both the Dirac and Schrodinger character of the electron.
But does Fermi momentum of the electron appear anywhere in some?
Yeah, it's all hiding in there. So
Oscillation with KF inverse.
I think there are. I have not shown it here, but yeah. In fact, it will certainly depend on the Fermi momentum. So what I'm showing here is a particular dimensionless constant. This is the bias versus the potential, and so the bias, well, the Fermi the chemical potential actually is hiding in this expression. with the bias. Okay. Okay. So we also studied what happens if instead of a metal you have a ferromagnetic film on that side. Okay, so then you get additional features, but I'm not showing it here. But so we did that problem also. So you have two topological insulators and a ferromagnet. And now we are making we are also studying now what happens if you have two topological insulators and a superconductor, and then you get interesting effects there also. Okay. So this is the last part. So here we studied what happens if you have a spin polarized STM tip which you hold near the surface of a topological insulator and you're tunneling into the topological insulator. So the reason for doing this study is the following. So we know that in the topological insulator surface the spin momentum and the linear momentum are locked 90 degrees to each other. So if the STM tip is spin polarized, so it's pointing in the electrons there in the STM are magnetized in some direction, then that means the spin of the electrons tunneling from the tip into the surface will point in one particular direction, right? Those spins will also. So now if spin polarized electrons now tunnel into the surface, then they can only move in one particular direction. Okay, so that would mean that depending on what the magnetization of the STM tip is, the electrons entering the surface only move in one direction. However, it may be very difficult to measure the direction of the current, because all you can really study is if you attach leads to the topological insulator, you'll see how much current is flowing from the STM to the surface, but not in which direction they're traveling. Okay. So you really cannot see this effect very directly, but what you can show next is that if you break the symmetry, rotational symmetry in the topological insulator surface by applying some field which doesn't depend on the spin itself. So let's say you have an in-plane electric field which breaks the rotational symmetry in the surface but doesn't break the spin rotation invariance, and you have this magnetized STM tip. Now the current that enters from the tip to the surface will also depend on the direction of this magnetization. Okay, so it's a little complicated, but it is basically an interplay between the fact that spin and momentum are coupled on the topological insulator surface. So if you break the rotational invariance on the surface, you also affect the spin rotational invariance. Okay, and so that will give rise to a dependence of this tunneling current on the STM tip magnetization. Okay, so this is a proposed setup, and so this is, it goes back to the kind of geometry I showed you earlier of crossed electric and magnetic fields. So let's say you have an electric field in the x direction on the surface of the topological insulator. You have the magnetic field purely in the z direction now, let's say, so it's a perfectly crossed electric and magnetic field. And then you have this STM tip, and the spin of the electrons in the STM tip points in some arbitrary direction, which has these angles, the polar angles alpha with respect to the z axis and the azimuthal angle beta. Okay, so remember alpha and beta will be the two angles. Okay, the two angles of the magnetization of the electrons in the STM tip. Okay, and you have broken the symmetry, rotational symmetry in the plane by this electric field. Okay, so this work, by the way, involves four of us, and we are all in this room, I think. Sorin, Das, Kush, Saha, and Krishnendu. Okay, so very briefly, this is a formalism. So there is a tunneling current which has to do with, so there is a Fermi golden rule. There is the energy of the tip electrons minus the energy of the surface electrons minus the bias times the difference of the Fermi-Dirac distributions in the tip and the surface times the matrix element squared. To calculate the matrix element squared, you need the tip and surface wave functions. So here, because of this particular setup that we have a magnetic field pointing out of the plane, so you are not going to have perfect spin momentum locking. I mean, there will be some amplitude for the spin to point out of the plane. Okay, so the surface electrons, they have a form like this. So the upper and lower components are not exactly equal in magnitude. If you had perfect spin momentum locking in the plane, they would be equal in magnitude. But so here we are allowing some amount of violation of spin momentum locking. Okay, it could differ from one a little bit. Okay.
So it's like proximity effect. Like
yes. Yeah. Well, here you have a magnetic field, so it's actually changing the wave functions a little bit, and you violated the time reversal symmetry.
Magnetic field, the way it looks good.
Yes.
The whole thing looks like a proximity problem, because Imagine sending an electron from a metal side. It will leak inside and see momentum, magnetic field in K space, and it will come back and
Yeah.
that information.
Yes.
So there will be some characteristic length where it
Yeah.
will look like
Right.
partial.
But here we don't have any barriers. It's an uniform system with just a magnetic field.
No, no,
Yeah.
because maybe I'm
So
seeing
this is
the
this is
previous.
yeah, this is different
Okay,
from the
I'll
previous
come back
model.
on
Yeah. But this setup actually is nice that it can also probe violations of spin momentum locking, as you'll see. So even if the spin points out of the plane a little bit, the result should reflect that. So then we discover that tunneling conductance has several pieces. So let me point out some of the pieces. So there is one piece which is proportional to cosine alpha. So alpha, remember, was the polar, one of the polar angles. So that piece is sensitive to violation of spin momentum locking. So it's 0 if kappa is 1, if the spins are in the plane, but it's non-zero if the spin points a little bit out of the plane. So that's the cosine alpha term. The sine alpha term also has a term proportional to cosine of beta. So that's sensitive to the azimuthal angle of the electrons in the STM tip. So this full expression is sensitive to the direction of the tip, the electrons in the STM, as I said. Okay, so here are some plots. So the exact, the different features of this are not very important, but what we just try to show here is that, so these are the cases where the STM tip electron is polarized either directly in the plus Z direction or in the minus Z direction. Okay, so and between those two, if you look at the tunneling conductance versus the bias, you see you get completely different plots, and we just showed it for two values of alpha. In general, it will change smoothly from this to this, but this is showing very clearly that it depends on the direction of the STM tip magnetization. Okay. Yeah, so these have to do with, they have something to do with the Landau levels, because we have this magnetic field pointing out of the surface. So the electrons sort of organize, the electrons on the surface organize themselves into Landau levels.
So they're
also.
numerically broader.
Yeah, right.
Is this somehow related to Shubnikov?
I think this is just a problem, a Landau level problem, right? I mean, you have a surface and there's a magnetic field perpendicular to it, so you get Landau levels. That's all there is to it. I mean, it's not, there's no particular band structure that we are probing here. So the width is not numerical. The width is so there is some amount of freedom because of the ky, right? There's also a momentum in the plane, and that shows up in the energy dispersion, right? When you solve that problem of crossed electric and magnetic field, you just don't get Landau levels. You get Landau level n plus half, well, square root of n Dirac Landau levels, plus you have a piece proportional to the momentum. So that spreads out the energy levels a little bit. So that's the effect, that's the reason for the width of these peaks. Okay, I'm almost done. And this final one is the dependence on the conductance on the azimuthal angle beta. Okay, so again you see that there is a variation with beta, and it's quite a large variation. It's of the order of 20% for certain values of beta. So this is very clearly showing you that this setup that we have proposed is really sensitive to the direction of the STM tip magnetization. Okay, so I should emphasize that none of these results would work if you had something like tunneling from an STM tip onto graphene. Okay, because there you don't have any locking between spin and momentum, and so you will not see any effect of the tunneling conductance on the azimuthal angle of the STM tip, or so this is really special to a topological insulator. Okay.
So on the other hand, you have pseudo spin locking. So if you specialize in AB sublattice, you could see some,
That's true. Yes.
because that will distinguish.
Yeah. So if your STM tip was really fine, that
There,
that it could distinguish between, yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is a summary. So I've already gone through all this. So we studied conductance on the surface of a topological insulator across magnetic and potential barriers, and I showed that if the magnetic barrier is large, it can cut off the current, so it can act as a current switch. We looked at a junction of two topological insulator states and showed how the transmission depends on the barrier strength and bending angle. I pointed out the edge states at the junction, and they might in principle can be probed by spin resolved RPS and spin polarized STM, because they have a dispersion and spin polarization which is different from the surface states. we looked at transmission between two topologically insulated surfaces and a metal surface, and I showed you that the current both oscillates and decays as the barrier strength increases. So it shows both Schrodinger and Dirac character. And finally, we showed that if you have tunneling from a spin polarized STM tip to the surface of a topological insulator, this can be used to detect violations of the spin momentum locking. Okay, thank you.
Go back to your Dirac, the matching boundary condition.
Okay. With the metal.
With the metal, yeah.
Yeah.
Because to me, the problem looks like proximity effect problem. In the sense, your topological character will leak into the metal over some length scale.
No, but what we have done is we have we have taken a sharp. We are assuming a sharp boundary, so it's either metal or topological insulator.
But if you look at the wave functions in detail,
okay,
I suspect there will be some topological character of this spin in momentum space. If you think in some Thomas Fermi sense, as you move away, of course, it's there is no momentum spin locking.
Right.
But at the boundary, you should see some kind of
so
leakage.
So if you really started with a microscopic model, that should happen. So the Hamiltonian should change character gradually from.
Or even with this boundary condition. Finally, in superconductor proximity effect.
Yeah.
You can get many of these things through boundary condition and Andre reflection.
Yeah. But see, in these boundary conditions, we really assume that it's completely Schrodinger type on one side and Dirac on the other side.
Right.
We are just matching them. So there is no leakage of the Hamiltonian in that
it's a
sense.
boundary
But
condition
maybe Krishnan has something to say. Yeah.
Which propagates, right?
Yeah.
One thing.
Ah.
So imagine that an electron goes in towards the metal, and the part of it gets reflected.
Right.
So its spin component along a particular direction, is going to get reversed. And that is sort of an analog of unrev reflection, except that it's not a particle which goes in and whole comes out, but in momentum space it's, in spin space it gets reversed. And that would induce some amount of, this topological character. Yes, near the boundary probably, but it's not so easy to see from here actually.
Yes, but if you really understood the junction, we would really know these parameters that we have introduced.
I had a quick question about you just have, in the first part of the talk with barriers, they have spin unpolarized conventional STM measurements with step edges and with potential barriers. I guess step edges by Kapitolnik and sort of potential oscillations by Vidyamadhavan, I think.
Right.
Is there any way to relate what's measured in STM using these scattering states? Like I know how that works in 1D, but I haven't thought about it in 2D.
Yeah. So actually, we have not looked at the effect of steps. I mean, in a realistic situation, you don't have the sharp junctions, right? It would go through a lot of steps. So we have not looked at that. Other people have, and so you can study various things, like you can look at Friedel oscillations in the density and so on, and those will have an effect on the STM tunneling. But we have not studied that ourselves.
I had a quick question.
Okay.
Maybe I missed this, but how are you imagining applying the electric field across the metallic topological insulator state? Like you'll have a current going through it, or would it be AC, or does it not matter?
Yeah, it could have. I mean, it could apply a potential difference between the two edges of the topological insulator, and but DC, right? I mean, this is Yeah,
along the surface.
Along the surface, yeah.
Current going through.
That's
so
right.
Did you try to estimate like how much current that would be for the fields that you're thinking about? Or?
No.
Okay. No, but the surface state itself is metallic, right?
Yeah, no, we didn't estimate that.
All right. I guess. Okay. If there are no other questions, let's thank Diptiman again. And there's this souvenir from the organizers.
Thank you.
And Rotary.